Hey everybody, Steve Sefcik from Should Have Been Engineering. We finally got into our fall season here in Florida. It's just absolutely gorgeous out. I think it's probably, I don't know, maybe 77 or 78 degrees instead of like 107 degrees. I'm not standing in a pool of sweat. So it makes me feel like it's time to do some videos. So I've been kind of thinking, you know, over my time off here, what kind of videos you guys would like to see, how I could do some things that kind of put things in perspective. So I thought what we were going to do today is we'll deal with the issue of valve adjustment. Not so much how to do valve adjustment, but why we do valve adjustment. And this is not going to be just for the C10 that I'm doing it on. This goes to, you know, any four-stroke engine, anything that's got valves in it. This is why proper valve clearances are very important, okay? So you guys out there that are going to watch this that have C14s, you'll also understand when we walk away from the end of this video why you have to do valve adjustments, what's at risk when you're not doing valve adjustments. So I've set up a little kind of show and tell over here. We're going to use the compression gauge, and we'll get an idea of what happens when an engine is properly adjusted and what happens when it's misadjusted. Okay, or when clearances have gone away just kind of through natural wear. All right, so let's go ahead and get at it. All right, what you see here is the compression gauge is hooked up into the cylinder. I've set my valve clearances 9 thousandths on the exhaust, 6 thousandths on the intake, so the valve clearances are proper. And you see I took the top of the carburetor off of number 1 carburetor and put just a little piece of paper there so you can see how it reacts. So what I'm going to do is open the throttle, which needs to be done every time you're doing a compression check, and I'm going to go ahead and run a compression check on this, okay? Okay, so we're at 180. And you also got to see the paper as it was jumping up and down. Now basically what was going on there is when it would get a little bit of back pressure, it would come up and then it would get sucked down by vacuum. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to relieve this pressure, and I'm going to take this valve right here and I'm going to take the clearance out of that valve. I'm just going to tighten that adjuster down just a little bit to take the clearance out of the valve. Okay, so you see that I've got my cam lobe up and I've got clearance on my rocker. I'm just going to back this off, turn this down. Okay, so that should have taken the clearance out of the rocker. Now, let's go ahead and run the test again. Alright everybody, you can watch and see where the gauge ends up, and also watch the paper towel and see what happens. Okay, now let me make sense out of it for you so you know what you were looking at. First one, the valves were properly adjusted, the compression is being held inside the cylinder, and you saw very minimal pressure coming back up and coming into the intake track. So when the paper towel was moving up, it would get a very slight pressure pulse, but you also saw that it got sucked back down. Well, that was the intake pulse, okay? So then whenever we tighten that one valve a little bit, now you're getting leakage past the valve. We had 180 pounds PSI compression value before we tightened that one valve. If you noticed, after we tightened the valve, the compression went down to 100 pounds. And you also saw that the paper moved much more radically, particularly upward. It was getting blown upward and finally got blown right off of the carburetor. So basically what you're seeing there is all that compression that we weren't being able to trap in the cylinder was escaping back up the intake track. This is exactly the same thing that happens inside every four-stroke motor. This is what's happening inside of your motorcycle. So when you're wondering why are we adjusting valves, strictly from a performance standpoint and an economy standpoint, if you lose your compression and you lose your intake pulse, you're going to be losing power and you're going to be losing economy. One more thing is that when the valves are not getting on the seat, they don't have an opportunity to cool off. And if they can't cool off, they're going to burn, the seats are going to burn, and eventually you're going to create damage that actually takes new parts to repair it, which starts getting very, very expensive. So I hope everybody's learned something here. Hopefully you understand now why you're doing valve adjustments. This is something that, you know, if you have hydraulic valves, that takes care of it itself. You know, hydraulic adjusters, back, you know, in the old days, we had that in the old Chevys and Fords and everything. These aren't like that. They need to be maintained. You do need to do adjustments on C14, FJR, ST1300, absolutely your material. Anything that has a mechanical valve lash, you have to keep an adjustment. All right, everybody. Thanks, and as always, join COG.